Hello, if you've been here before, welcome back. If you've seen this video series before or want to head straight to the video content, go to the timecode below. If it's your first time here, hi, my name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. This is the next entry into my Fear Entity Exploration video series where I analyze the dread powers within the Magnus Archives, which is a horror podcast created by Johnny Sims and Alexander J. Newell for the Rusty Quill production company. I will be analyzing 3 episodes that focus on a specific entity, and using those episodes, its contents, and their connections to the grander story to explore the entity and how it's used within the show. I have chosen these episodes based on my rankings of every season of the Magnus Archives, and I have a playlist with those ranking videos if you so desire to be familiar with my opinions. This is a heavy spoiler warning for the entirety of the Magnus Archives, as I will be discussing these episodes with the full knowledge of all 200 episodes. You have been warned. Enjoy.
The spiral is the fear of madness, right? That worry that your world isn't right, that your mind is lying to you.
The fear of madness. That your mind is playing tricks on you, that your senses aren't telling the truth, that you've gone insane. The fear that what you perceive as your reality has been changed, that what you rely on to survive has turned on you, and that you cannot trust anything. Hallucinations, fractals, deception, and falsehood. Your reality is built by the pictures created by your senses and your mind. Everything you see, hear, touch, and any other mixture of the senses conveys information about your world, and your mind takes that information and interprets it. Your world is connected by logical changes in space and time, and it's your mind's job to make sense of it all and tell you what to do. So, what happens if your mind can't make sense of your world? What if your world is not making sense? What if you can't trust your understanding of reality? A world disconnected from logic, a reality fractured and unmoored, is a state that is hard to navigate. Being unable to trust your own mind and your own senses is a terrifying experience. The Spiral in the Magnus Archives portrays this fear extremely well. It's an ambitious fear, detailing the undetailable. It's difficult to convey the madness caused by the spiral and how it affects people, but this show does it in innovative and interesting ways. It's colorful, compelling, and popular. Colorful. This was supposed to be purple. I'm also lighting it. This is the first time I'm actually using a secondary light. Usually I use these LEDs. I don't know if you can't see them, but I have LEDs on right now, and it's supposed to be like this yellow. I had first thought to do purple because that made sense with the spiral, but in reference to the yellow wallpaper, the short story, and also the yellow wallpaper in the corridors, the back room, stuff like that, I decided to go yellow. The color's not showing up on my camera that well, so this is going to also be color corrected. That's fine. Also, I am a little sick today, so if I sound a little sick, that's because I am a little sick. Oh well. Anyways, the Spiral in the Magnus Archives uses fractals, lies, patterns, and shifting space to convey its horror. But what helps this fear stand out amongst the rest is a significant representative, the distortion. Similar to Jared Hopworth with the Flesh and Agnes Montague with the Desolation and some other avatars, the Spiral isn't represented by any main good characters, quote-unquote good. The Distortion is an amazingly written antagonist slash ally slash monster slash, I don't know how to define distortion, that sustains the Spiral's presence throughout the entire show. One of the issues that some of the dread powers meet is how do you stay relevant throughout the entire show? I mean, after the unknowing, the stranger sort of falls off. What's very ambitious about the Distortion specifically is that it manages to stay relevant and compelling throughout all 5 seasons. Michael the Distortion, Michael Shelley, holds seasons 1 and 2, and then in the middle of season 3, nearly the middle of the entire show, Helen Richardson, Helen Distortion, switches in, who then stays prominent throughout seasons 4 and 5. So they're both handling both ends of the show. The Distortion has the charisma, the execution, and the writing to be important in the entire body of work of this show. The distortion is so good that it does overcompensate for these standalone episodes. The distortion is so good that it does compensate for the standalone episodes, which, in my opinion, for the Spiral, are not as good comparably. I wouldn't go as far as to say I didn't like the standalone episodes, not like other entities' standalone episodes, but it's just that some episodes are better than others. And unlike Agnes and Jared, the distortion has the advantage of appearing in other episodes not focused on the Spiral. So even if the Spiral isn't mentioned, it's still evoked by Helen or Michael being weird. Per my count, there are 12 episodes with statements or events that solely feature elements, aspects, or avatars of the Spiral, not counting overlapping episodes. Of these, only 4 of them do not feature the distortion, and yet Helen still appears in 2 of them. It's 177 Wonderland with Dr. David. That statement is not about Helen. She just happens to be there. And then 183 Monument with the professors trapped, and Helen also just appears in both episodes to bother John and Martin and Basira. So she's there, you know. And this isn't even counting the random moments that the distortion appears, such as in 8 Burn Out when it terrorizes Ivo Lenzik's father, or in 80 The Librarian when Leitner's assistant, Gregory Todd, runs into a door that wasn't there. That's a distortion. Those episodes are not Spiral focused at all. What I'm saying is the distortion is everywhere, and there's still some small, quick, random Spiral moments, but the focus is mostly on Michael or Helen. And I'm not mad about it. I also like that the distortion episodes vary in quality, ambitious with its inclusion. For the Spiral, some episodes do feel a bit, for lack of a better word, pretentious. The Spiral is very cerebral and very specific, and at times it can stretch the horror a bit too far into either very verbose, with overextended descriptions trying to get you to understand what's happening, or very simplistic, using the visual motifs of patterns or spirals or fractals to drive the point in quickly. Either way, the Spiral does what the Spiral wants to do very well, and very ambitiously. The distortion is a great character to evoke this fear, and how it's used is very good. I really enjoy the Spiral, as many people do, as Michael is a popular character, and the Dread Power is a popular entity. What I want to do is look at the 3 episodes I've chosen about the Spiral and use them to explore the things I like about this Dread Power and the individual successes of the episode. As I said before, I'm making this series in ascending order from the entities I least like to most like, so of 15, the Spiral is number 6. I'll let y'all guess which of the Dread Fears are my top 3. For the Spiral, the 3 episodes I've chosen are 38 Lost and Found, 47 The New Door, and 101 Another Twist.
So I went the same way as a lot of my peers. Lose the premises, start selling only high-margin goods direct to specific clients who can afford them, or shift a few guaranteed sellers on the auction. It's the only real way to stay afloat in the business nowadays, but the competition is intense, and getting the caliber of artifact you need has become a more cutthroat affair. I'm not the only one in the business to recently soften their attitude towards buying from people like Mikhail Salesa.
Case number 0120606, statement of Andre Romeo regarding a series of misplaced objects lost over the course of 3 months. Original statement given June 6, 2012, released September 28, 2016. Brief summary of this episode. John begins recording Andre Romeo's statement, who starts by talking about the pen he was lent by the statement taker and hoping he can keep track of it. He talks of his antiquing business and needing to do some business with Mikhail Salesa, whose reputation isn't the best. Nervous, Romeo goes to Salesa's warehouse hoping to buy something to get out of debt, and finds a Ming Dynasty-era vase with a geometric design. He buys it, haggling for a slightly lower price than what Salesa wants for it, and heads home, needing to go to sleep because of an intense headache. From then on, Romeo begins losing objects, important things that his husband David doesn't remember. In the invoice from Salesa, he forgot to add the vase, and when Romeo tells him about it, he says he doesn't remember it, and it doesn't belong to him. As more objects keep disappearing, Romeo tries and repeatedly fails to get rid of the vase and begins to watch it. One night, he falls asleep in front of it and wakes to see all of the objects he lost being pushed out from the vase, all followed by fingers pulling themselves out from it. Romeo flees before seeing who comes out, and when he returns home, his husband has disappeared and no one remembers him. Now, the vase has disappeared as well, but things keep vanishing, even the pen he was given. John finishes his statement saying that Tim found Romeo's half-filled marriage license. He mentions Salesa appearing in a prior statement and also mentions some objects in artifact storage were purchased from him as well. John's distracted as he sees a spider and tries to kill it, accidentally knocking down some shelves. Sasha comes in and notices a dent in the wall, and when John investigates, we hear squirming sounds. John realizes things are coming and tells Sasha to run as the tape recording ends. This is a memorable, almost standalone episode for The Spiral. It's the second episode to feature Michaelis Lesa. It's the beginning of the end for season 1, and also queer. We love that. Happy June Pride Month. I hope I'm releasing this. No, I think I'm going to release this in early July. I'm recording this in mid to late June. Oh well. This episode is commonly referred to as the one with the homophobic vase, which I find pretty funny because, these fears don't discriminate, and the events of this episode could have happened to anybody, but because it takes his husband, it's homophobic. Romeo begins his statement blabbering about the statement taker's pen, thanking them for handing it to him, but he worries that it might disappear. He had a pen to begin with, but when he put it down, it vanished. He uses this pen to write the statement. He makes a joke about the antiquing business, apologizing and saying that he uses humor to comfort himself, though people don't usually laugh. Meeting with Salesa, he did this same joke, and Salesa laughed, and Romeo focuses on that moment, proof that he was there and he bought the vase from Salesa. Without that memory, he probably would have questioned finding it from Salesa in the first place. He elaborates more about Michaelis Lesa, who has good quality antiques, but tends to be connected to illegal dealings. Some of his colleagues have bought from Salesa, but discovered that the objects were either missing a proper import papers, aka smuggled, or reported stolen, also aka smuggled. He mentions a Charlie Miller who was arrested over a Georgian brooch he bought from Salesa. Romeo avoids him to avoid trouble. I'll be showing pictures of objects mentioned because for these kinds of statements and stories, some objects are simply listed and don't make a big impact. I feel like a visual medium would help show what is being mentioned, making it a bit more memorable, especially here when things are actually disappearing. The main focus here, the vase, is pretty memorable though, so it's not as egregious in this episode. Regarding the Georgian brooch, I don't know if this is a reference to something else or just a random example. It's fun to try to imagine what kind of illegal stuff Salesa did to get it. I don't think it's anything big. It's just an example of a backstory. Romeo tries to avoid Salesa, but as the antiquing business shrank with the times and things became more competitive and exclusive, Romeo and other sellers became more reliant on people like Salesa to produce very high quality goods. At Salesa's warehouse, which, fun detail, has a fancy sign over the door for the showroom. That's it. It literally just is a warehouse. Romeo notes the many packaged antiques, something easily packed up and taken away, very symbolic of someone who's doing very illegal stuff, ready to run away quickly. He also notes boxes full of books. Odd, considering Salesa mentions in 115 Taking Stock that he doesn't sell books because of his history with Leitner. It's not like a bad continuity mistake. He might as well be just lying to the statement taker in Taking Stock, or he's just saying whatever to say whatever. You can never really take what Salesa says at face value, you know? Romeo buys a pair of Revolutionary War-era cavalry sabers used on horseback, and British artilleryman's tunic from World War I, which, when I first listened to this, I thought it was like a one-piece type of deal, but no, it's a war thing. In an attempt to undo some debt, Romeo looks for something big, finding the vase. From the Jiaying period, so Salesa said, and the construction seemed to back him up. The glaze and the workmanship fitted with mid to late Ming dynasty, but there was something off about the actual design. Instead of the pictures or scenes common to the ceramics of the period, the blue glaze was painted on in crisp, thin geometric lines. Just because covering all the bases, history lesson. The Jing period of the Ming Dynasty, as Romeo mentions, mid to late, is 1522 to 1567. Ming Dynasty era pottery tends to look like these pictures, but the blue vase was just decorated in geometric lines, not in these images of things painted on there. You know what I mean? That's why it's odd. Like the geometric lines is a different type of art style than that. Okay, history lesson over. Romeo says that the lines became more intricate as you got closer, almost hypnotic, and it made Romeo's head hurt. Intricate fractal lines are common motifs with the spiral, a good indicator for the spiral is doing something here. In 8 Burned Out, as I mentioned prior, Ivo Lansing says his father became obsessed with his work, which was just drawing fractals. He was going to shake mathematics to its foundation once he figured out this truth hidden in these cascading fractal patterns. In 32 Hive, Jane Prentice describes her fascination with the whorls of the wasp's nest, and she says it's not because of the patterns. She's not one of those fools chasing fractals. No, no, no. In 91, The Coming Storm, my crew explains that the Lichtenberg figure that chased him was made of fractals. I want to note one of my first interactions with fractals was the iteration fractals in Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, which is a great showcase of how intense fractals can be. And in this show, fractals are mostly calling cards than anything actually scary. And I wish there was more spiral manifestations similar to what happened to Lansing's father and the Lichtenberg figure, like actually dangerous fractals. I wish there was more of that focused on, like, featured in statements. Back on track, Romeo haggles for a lesser price of the vase and takes his things and leaves, hoping he won't have to return anytime soon. I don't think he ever will. He tries to do some work at home, but his headache is so bad he has to go to sleep. This headache was induced by the fractal pot, and thus it marked him. The fractal pot is what, like, the wiki calls the homophobic vase, but it's a homophobic vase, you know what I mean? Now that the vase has marked him, he loses one of his 3 pairs of shoes. But his husband David says he always had 2 pairs. What do you mean? What are you talking about? You always had 2 pairs. What are you talking about? 3rd pair? What? Romeo felt wrong about it, but he didn't think much of it after that. Hello, we are introduced to his husband, David. That's my name as well. We don't get much description of him, unfortunately. He's just kind of there. And I've mentioned this prior in my Lonely Entity exploration, that in the UK, gay marriage wasn't legalized until 2014 in, actual our world. But this statement takes place in 2012. So, in this alternate reality, gay rights moved just a tad bit quicker. Regarding queer people and the horrors, in 11 Dreamer, Oliver Banks mentions having dated a Graham, likely the same Graham in 3 Across the Street, who was killed by the Not Them. And the stranger isn't called homophobic. Justice for equal opportunity vase gaslighting. Romeo soon gets the invoice from Salesa, markedly lower than expected, and he sees that he wasn't charged for the vase. When he tries to tell Salesa about it, suspicious that he was pushing the legality of the sale, Salesa says he doesn't remember the vase. He asks for a picture of it, and when he sees it, when Romeo sends him a picture of it, Salesa reacts oddly. It was a long time before he spoke again, and when he did, he sounded different, almost scared, I thought. He told me that I could keep it, no charge. I began to protest again, but he ignored it. I remember his exact words. I do not remember having that thing, which means it belongs to you. Then he hung up. Not taking this as the red flag that it is, Romeo doesn't worry about it. He soon loses his signed copy of Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, which he struggled to get. But again, like the shoes, his husband David says he never had such a thing. What are you talking about? Catch-22? What? He begins questioning his reality, getting to the crux of what the vase wants. Maybe I am crazy. It makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? It would make it neat. Except no, I would need to have gone mad a long time before this for the idea of it being in my head to hold up. My perceptions are the only ones I can trust. Maybe. I don't know. He begins to fear that his mind has been lost. He mentions losing a tie and his grandfather's teapot, and then the same tunic he bought from Zalesa. He even checks the invoice he was sent, with everything but the vase listed. Now the tunic was erased, a blank space on the paper. Again, he calls Zalesa, who doesn't remember selling him the tunic. His husband David and Zalesa both tell him that such things never existed, that he must be imagining things. He worries that no one believes him. He begins to connect the disappearing, maybe never there, objects to the vase when he can't get rid of it. He can't sell it, his documents don't line up, someone even sends it back saying she doesn't remember buying it. It has latched itself onto Romeo and won't let him go. Gradually, I began to get suspicious of the thing, sitting there with its cascading, maddening patterns in that vile cobalt blue, trying to tell me that my things didn't exist, that they hadn't vanished when I know they have. He begins watching it, which worries his husband David even further. A month before he gave his statement, he fell asleep in front of the vase and wakes up around 2 in the morning. Throughout this, the things that Romeo disappears are kept in flux. He remembers them, but no one else does. It could very well be that the vase is planting these false memories onto him, that in reality he did only have 2 pairs of shoes, and it made him think that he had 3. Means less work for the vase, no? Implanting false memories? But he begins to see those objects he's lost spill out of the vase. His signed copy of Catch-22 is first, then his shoes, his tie, all the other objects. As if showing him, look, everything that has been taken. You're not wrong. But then he sees fingers curling over the lip of the pot. He focuses on the dirty nails. An impossible thing for a person to come from the pot to fit in it, but still something is there with dirty nails, taking the things he owns and making everyone else forget about them. This kind of power is similar to what the not them does, replacing someone, making everyone else forget about them except for one person who then fears but not them. No one else remembers these objects, just Romeo, and he fears his mind too. An isolating experience of terror. Romeo flees before he can see the rest of that person pull themselves out of the vase, and in the morning returns to find that both the vase and his husband David have disappeared. According to the housing association, Romeo has always lived alone. What are you talking about? You're single. You live alone. The vase continues to take things from Romeo, including the pen that he borrowed. Without further information, it's plausible that Romeo will keep losing things, but I don't think he will be killed by the vase. It just wants to keep terrorizing him. Maybe, once he has run out of things to take, it will take him, and he will be lost in the spirals of the cobalt vase. John finishes up the statement saying that Tim found a copy of the marriage license with Romeo's signature, but his husband David's missing. It's just a blank spot. This is similar to the blank space on the invoice for the tunic he had bought. Proof that David was real and that he was taken by the homophobic vase. Also, I'm sorry, a vase sounds too pretentious right now. Vase. It's a homophobic vase. Homophobic vase? No. John also talks about Zalesa being seen again, first noticed in case number 0112905, or as we know it, 14 Piecemeal. I mentioned Piecemeal as Zalesa's first appearance in my flesh entity exploration, and that he shows up surrounding strange artifacts. Regarding Zalesa and other connections to the spiral in 141 Doomed Voyage, he had a patterned rug on his ship that killed a man, possibly another fractal-like object that I want featured more. Like, what about a statement about the rug, you know? Before John can continue talking about Zalesa, he gets distracted by a spider and swats to kill it. In doing so, some shelves collapse, summoning Sasha with the noise. She tells John to not let Martin know that he killed a spider because Martin will give him another lecture about how they are important to the ecosystem. I guess pulling into larger themes, in 22 Colony, Martin mentions he likes spiders, And throughout season 5, Annabelle Kane says that she wanted Martin to be a part of the web. So, this builds up towards that subtly. It's not a big thing, but it's there. The shelves make a dent on the wall, confusing them because it should be an external wall. So, there should be a space there. I think this isn't intentional, but it's definitely interesting to note that this happens during a Spiral episode, a space not fitting with reality. John sees the squirming worms coming and warns Sasha to run, ending the episode. Next episode, 39 Infestation, Jane Prentice will attack, but was not ready to. Interesting connection here between the Spiral and the Corruption, the first episode that introduces Michael the Distortion, 26, A Distortion. He shows Sasha how to kill Jane's silver worms using CO2 canisters. Those are secret tools to be used later. I've mentioned this many times before. That spider was sent by the web to lure John to kill it, thus revealing the worms. Things begin to come together. This is the finale of season 1. As we continue with the show, Michael Distortion will feature prominently, both an antagonist and an ally. But in his next appearance, he's nothing but terrifying. For now, this episode is really good because it sets up some motifs for the Spiral. But now we get into the main crux of the Spiral, the Distortion.
The branching corridors were identical. Mirrors and paintings that mirrored them were everywhere. And when I turned back, I think I must have gotten turned around because the left turn that would have led back towards the door wasn't there anymore. It was another long corridor with paths off to the right.
Case number 01610002, statement of Helen Richardson regarding a new door in a house she was selling. Statement recorded directly from subject, 2nd October 2016, released January 11th, 2017. Brief summary of this episode. John begins recording this statement, but Helen Richardson isn't paying attention, trying to draw a map, but not making sense of it. John encourages her to tell her story, and she talks about working for a real estate company. She had multiple appointments at a house, and she reiterates how normal the house was when the last client appeared, who was definitely not whom she thought they would be. A tall man with long blonde hair arrived, and while Helen was surprised, she thought she had missed an email and gave him a quick tour of the house. He points out a door that she swears wasn't there before, and he encourages her to enter. Helen walks into an impossible space, long hallways with mirrors or pictures of the same hallway. When she turns back, the door has turned into a mirror, and she tries and fails to leave. Eventually begins to walk the corridors and wander there for 3 days, until she sees in a distance a strange figure with distorted shapes and bulbous and sharp hands. She flees, finding a mirror frame without the monster, and finds herself outside. Passerbys help her up, and she goes to the hospital for dehydration. Helen stayed at home for some time, but after a recurring nightmare, she decided to come give her statement to the Institute. John says he believes her, asking if the man she met was called Michael, which she says he was. John promises to do some research, and she leaves, relieved. John calls out to Sasha, telling her he had a statement of someone meeting her Michael and asks if she had anything new to add. He wants her to investigate, and she admonishes his lack of attention for some paperwork. After she leaves, Michael Distortion appears, telling John that she is lying to him. John tries to get Michael to talk about himself, and he finds it difficult, and says he came to retrieve Helen. John realizes Helen left his office through a door that has never been there. When John tries to threaten Michael, he stabs his hand. Michael says that while he's a neutral party, he didn't want to lose the Institute so soon, which is why he helped with Jane's attack. He leaves before he reveals more to John, and the recording ends. This is such an important episode to this show. A thorough showcase of the danger of the distortion, an introduction of a future plot beat, and a glimpse at a wider story. First off, we have another live statement. Imogen Harris plays Helen Richardson here pretty straight. Well, okay, not, she very, very standard type of acting here. A harried, worried woman who questions her sanity. Later, she'll play Helen Distortion with a sense of play and fun mixed with the usual menace of Michael Distortion, or Distortion in general. Even further, in 26 Catching Up in the Magnus Protocol, Harris will return as Helen, and her performance here is spot on. And the character built up a bit more with a similar laugh to the distortion, which is a really fun detail. This episode begins with her trying to map out the corridors. Slightly distracted, John tries to get her to talk, but all she's focused on is the impossibility of the layout. Regarding Harris's performance here, I really like the desperation she has here.
Miss Richardson?
There are no left turns. Look, none. It just turns right. It doesn't make any sense. No, it wasn't a spiral because you could also go forward. I mean, I did mostly just forward, and the paths never got shorter. Like you were coming to a centre, they just kept going. It doesn't make any sense. Look at it.
Miss
Look at it.
Of the prior life statements so far, we haven't gotten such desperation and fear still present. All of them had their horror happen in the past, and they were simply reliving it. But for Helen, it's still present. She's still haunted by it. Also interesting to note, Helen, when she's describing the map, evokes a spiral, though she knows it couldn't be a spiral. But who knows? The distortion's corridors may almost be a spiral and impossible corridor. Definitely, just wanting to say spiral in an early episode. I get it. John gets her to start her statement, and she says that she's been working with Wolverton Kendrick Real Estate Agency for 8 years, though she has not returned to work since the events of the statement. Just to cover bases, that's not a true real estate agent. I do remember typing this up and writing, "That's not a real estate agent," and my Google Docs got angry with me. This fake real estate agency sells to successful professionals looking for family houses, usually around Wimbledon. And this day, she was running a viewing for a house on St. Albans Avenue. As far as I can tell, St. Albans Avenue doesn't exist, or I have not been able to find something like that. And I don't know if St. Alban is a reference to something or not. It's just a random name. Could be a random name. This house was selling for less than £2 million, which she says isn't suspiciously cheap, but still notable. She tries to find fault in it after the fact, but knows that it's just her memory trying to change it with the knowledge that she has now. I like that some statement givers start trying to describe omens before the horrors, but they realize it's just retrospective wishful thinking, hoping that they should have noticed this and they would have not have had the horror happen. But no, they didn't notice anything because there was nothing to notice. In 114 Crack Foundation, Anya Villette does this to Hilltop Road, but says she was busy with getting to her job and things were just easy to ignore if they were there at all. In 87 The Uncanny Valley, Sebastian Skinner even ignored all of the red flags when passing through Nikola Orsinov's skin factory. Helen says that after everything, she still has trouble imagining the house, though I think this is less sinister house, but more it's simply just a simple house, and the events after the fact are the most memorable things. Like, the house was not the reason this all happened. All she remembers as she's coming to this house is that she felt annoyed that she was a bit late to the appointment. She had multiple clients that day and has walked through the house many times, which is why she was certain that the door wasn't there. Her last meeting was with Mr. and Mrs. Adrian Lombardi, which instead of them, it was Michael Distortion. Her description of him being tall with curled hair is consistent with Sasha's description in 26A Distortion. As I mentioned, is Michael's first appearance. He tells Helen that Mr. Lombardi will not be coming, so he's here instead. And Helen knows that some clients send their people in their place and assumes she just missed an email. This is the client for Mr. Lombardi, whatever. I don't know what Michael did to the Lombardis. I don't think that there's enough evidence to suggest he killed them, but still, it's fun to speculate. When Helen tries to shake his hand, he only smiles at her. That was when I first started to think that something might be wrong, because his laugh didn't sound right. I don't know how to describe it, but it wasn't a human laugh. We'll return to this laugh, but note that it's described like this, as Sasha also described it as weird. Like he was laughing very quietly, but someone had turned up the volume so I could hear it. Helen decides to give him a tour just in case he was a client for the Lombardis, and he's already walked inside. He didn't speak while she showed him around, looking where she pointed but didn't seem to pay attention. It was only when they moved to the second floor, when Helen was showing him the study, that he pointed out the new door. It was a small, unremarkable door, painted dark yellow with a matte black handle, and it wasn't there before. Love this moment as Helen tries to explain how impossible this door was. Again, Harris knocks it out of the park.
I'd been up on that landing dozens of times already, and I definitely did not remember it being there. It wasn't just that I hadn't noticed it. You have to understand that. It wasn't there. It couldn't have been there. I checked the floor plan I had with me, and obviously there was no door shown on it. It was an exterior wall on the second floor. There can't have been anything beyond it but empty air and a significant drop. Except that I had made several circuits of the outside while showing off the garden, and there was absolutely no door visible there. It was just a dark yellow door that couldn't be there.
The repeated insistence couldn't and can't have been and shouldn't. The fear she has of reality being changed. It's so good. He asks Helen what's in there, and she's shocked. She says she doesn't know how long she stared at it, her mind breaking at the impossibility. By then, she's forgotten about him as she opened the door. She says the handle was warm, a subtle detail that feels unnerving. She says the door swung open, and she didn't have to pull it, as if the door opened by itself, keen for her to come inside. She sees a long, windowless corridor. It was lit by electrical lamps attached to the walls every 10 feet or so, and the walls were papered over in a swirling green pattern. Running down the middle of the faded yellow carpet was a rug, black and thick, that disappeared off as the path very gradually curved to the left. She sees mirrors and frames that hold pictures or photos of the hallway. Another small detail that to me shows a sense of intent. Someone took those pictures, someone painted them. Helen doesn't remember stepping in, almost as if the door moved past her. She felt dread looking down the corridor and then heard the click of the door closing behind her. She turns to see the door replaced by a long mirror. I saw myself stood in that strange corridor, and it looked like I'd been crying for hours. Another subtle detail, the loss of time. Helen stood staring at the impossible corridor and lost time as she felt dread. She tries to break through the mirror, but she cannot find her way back to the house. When she pulls out her phone, all she can see on it is a picture of the hallway. Technology not working properly occurs at times in the show. In 28 Skin Tight, Melanie's recording of Sarah Baldwin in the hospital is horribly corrupted after the fact. In 42 Grifter's Bone, Jennifer Ling had issues trying to access the recording of Grifter's Bone on her phone, until she didn't. Ugh. And in 144 Decrypted, Gary Boylan's radio app picks up the number station that should not be there. In relation to the spiral, whenever a tape recorder enters the corridors, it has issues, manifesting as interference or even just not working, as in 79 Hide and Seek when Michael traps Martin and Tim in the corridors. Their tape recorder stops working. It's really fun seeing how the technology messes up. And then later in the show, the tape recorder is better able to withstand being in the corridors, which I feel like it's a better indication of John getting stronger in his powers. In season 5, when he's about to walk into Helen's corridor, she says that the tape recorder feels heavier, feels more alive. Really fun detail there. Helen decides to start walking, reasoning with herself that the hallway will eventually end, right? At first, she avoided taking branching paths, but after hours walking forward, there was no change. When she did take a new path, they looked identical to those before, and if she tried to backtrack, they changed. The colors also changing too, the wallpaper and the rugs and the carpet. She says that she felt like she couldn't trust her eyes. Later, Helen deduced that she was in the corridors for 3 days and never slept. She would curl up in despair and she became delirious without food or water. She says it was very warm there, but she couldn't stop shivering from her fear. She was about to collapse when she saw something. A figure far in the distance. It was almost human, but getting closer, she saw she was incorrect. Its body was thin and limp, and when it moved, it shifted, like I was watching it through rippling water. Its hands were swollen and bits of them jutted out at annoying angles. All of the mirrors showed how it looked, but still shifted in how it looked, and the only consistent detail was showing its hands as bulbous and sharp. It began to approach her, and she could hear Michael's laugh again. Trying to find her way out, she noticed a mirror frame without the creature reflected on it. By then, she was desperate and would die if the creature reached her anyways, so she threw herself into it. Dream logic, all the mirrors showed the corridor, showed the monster, but the only one that was wrong was her way out. Interestingly, in 156 Reflection, a young man scouting for a location for a rave finds himself in an extinction world coming through from a set of funhouse mirrors. He escapes from the world in a similar way, jumping through the mirror that didn't hold his own reflection. Helen finds herself in Dulwich, free of the corridors. St. Albans Avenue, as far as I can tell, like I said, isn't real, but she said that our company mostly sold around Wimbledon, so I looked it up. Wimbledon to Dulwich is about 30 minutes of travel, though I'm no expert whatsoever on UK geography. Either way, she was deposited far from the house that she went through. She went to a hospital for dehydration and then stayed at home for a few days. She says that she avoided opening doors, a lingering fear that a door that wasn't there would take her back. Fuck it, yeah, no, I really like her delivery on this as well.
And I spent a long time at home, not opening any doors.
So, addressing the elephant in the room. I had always planned to do this episode after The Flesh. I was delayed a bit because I impromptu decided to do a delayed video on Lightner, because I had delayed to do that, so this also got delayed a little bit. Check out the Lightner video if you so desire. But then I was just going to continue the series as usual. I have planned out which fears I'm going to do next. You don't know them, but I have them planned out. It just happened that the spiral fell around the same time as the Backrooms movie came out. The Backrooms movie came out early June late May? I forget exactly, because I watched it in the Pacific Northwest maybe a week after it came out, or less than a week after it came out. So like late May, early June, it came out. And I'm putting this out, I hope, in late June, early July. I absolutely adored the Backrooms movie, by the way. Check out my watch wrap-up for the month of May. We talked about it with my boyfriend. This episode and Backrooms shares a lot of similarities. However, this episode came out in 2017, and Kane Parsons' original YouTube videos came out in 2022. The original's Backrooms image and its iconic description was posted in 2019. What I'm saying is, it's so cool that two different pieces of media pull from similar things, something I mentioned having discussed in 150 Cul-de-sac and the movie Vivarium. Cul-de-sac Vivarium came out around the same time, probably pulling from same fears, but were not inspired by each other. What the Backrooms and Backrooms the movie and the New Door pull from is liminal space horror. Multiple other liminal space-esque horror media has come out. The Stanley Parable game in 2013 uses liminal space in similar ways, and early movies use liminal space for settings, like The Shining and Twin Peaks. I've seen The Shining, I have not seen Twin Peaks. I've seen Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, but I don't think it uses the liminal space as much as the show does. However, other media do seem to inspire the distortion, so it's not entirely in isolation. In the Season 2 Q&A Part 2, Johnny says that Uzumaki is one of the inspirations for Michael, which is an iconic horror manga by Junji Ito about spirals being evil. Also, while I haven't found a direct connection, Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves has to be a big influence, as Johnny's read it and named a character after one of the characters in the book, Rosie Zampano. The idea of an impossible door appearing in an impossible location is very House of Leaves coded, as in the book, a door appears on an exterior wall on the first floor living room. If I remember correctly, the house on Ash Tree Lane and its impossible growing corridors are gray and nondescript. And I can totally see Johnny adding color to differentiate them. Now, the distortion's hallways seem very similar to the backrooms. It's really fun seeing how media builds and changes along with each other. So cool. Love this type of horror. Helen finishes up her statement by saying she had a bout of nightmares and decided to come tell the Institute. In 160, the eye opens, Elias reveals that he looked for a recent victim of the distortion and convinced Helen to come to the Institute. He says he personally put her into a taxi because she was getting lost in the London streets. To what extent Helen knows Elias was manipulating her, I have no idea, and the absence of him or anyone else guiding her in her statement makes me think that he hid himself from her. Like, she could say, someone helped me get into a taxi or something like that, or someone helped me, told me to go to Institute. She doesn't say that. She said it's all like after her nightmare she came here. Maybe he was the bystander that helped her when she just came out of the corridors, but then she goes to the hospital and then go to her house, so I'm not fully sure about that. And also, she says it was only after her nightmares that she decided to come. John, as an eye avatar, shows up in the dreams of life statement givers, and in 120 eye contact, Elias reads those moments out. Maybe Elias has some ability to manipulate dreams, but we don't see anything else that could point to that. So overall, I've no idea how Elias got Helen to the Institute, but it worked. I think that he probably manipulated her without her knowing. That's why she never mentioned anything. I wish a little bit clearer about that, but that's not too big. John tells Helen that he'll look into her situation, and she asks if he believes her. Almost reluctantly, John says he does. Helen doesn't remember the name of the man, and John asks if he was called Michael. She lights up the memory catching. Yes, that's him. Do you know him? He agrees to help her and thanks her for her time, and she leaves. When she does, we hear the door open with a specific squeak.
Well, I'll just leave you to it then.
After a pause, John calls out to Sasha, which I'm counting as a jump scare because I jumped when it happened. Like a lot of tension building, and then Sasha, In comparison, the door doesn't sound as squeaky when Sasha walks in. John tells her that her Michael appeared again and says that they haven't re-recorded her statement of meeting Michael. In 40 Human Remains, John says that in the Prentice attacks, 3 tapes were lost. Those for 26 The Distortion, 24 Strange Music, and the tape that was running after Andre Romeo's statement. This, of course, is because the not Sasha would be revealed, and it hid those tapes from John as they contained Sasha's original voice. John will eventually find those tapes in 78 Distant Cousin, which will lead towards the end of Season 2. Not Sasha tells John that she doesn't have anything new to add to her encounter with Michael. John asks if she's busy, and she says she's reorganizing the discredited section that John has ignored since returning from the attack, as John's now gone into investigation mode and doesn't care about fake stories have been discredited. He tells her that when she's finished, she can start investigating Helen's case. As she closes the door, Michael's voice appears, almost as if he was hiding behind it. He asks John if he knows that they are lying to him, and John, not wholly paying attention, reacts by saying that this place is off limits, like Michael is just some random member of the public. When Michael speaks, the tape recorder begins to whine, almost as if his presence hurts the recording. Michael is played by Luc Boys in a superstar performance, his voice lilting and smooth. In their conversation, Michael responds to John in unnerving ways, catching onto different terms and laughing at him. We finally hear his famous laugh. The Distortion's laughter is a great feature of the character, one of the many reasons he's so memorable, as in the recording it echoes and sounds off. Helen's laugh, as I mentioned, sounds similar.
And make sure you come to me if you're ever, actually in the market for a house, eh?
I've seen people mention that the laugh isn't affected, at least from Bowie's side. As we hear in the blooper video, he just laughs like that.
The worker of clay had labelled for decades on that.
Bird.
Labelled, did I say again?
With his label maker of doom.
God, I'm knackered. I've been doing all of this labelling.
John quickly realizes and calls him Michael. He just says that that is a real name, a technically correct title, but as we will continue to see, identity and the distortion are antithetical. We will return to this later. John asks what he's doing here, and he says he came to collect what is his, Helen Richardson. John asks if he owns the corridors. What a fascinating question. Does your hand in any way own your stomach? I like how this begins to conceptualize these monsters, similar to how John and Leiner talk about them in A.D. the Librarian, saying monsters are like muscle spasms in relation to the dread powers. In 151 Big Picture, Simon Fairchild also mentions monsters in terms of like a spasming or a reaction that I don't really thinking is just a reaction to the horrors. John says Helen left, and Michael laughs at him, asking if he noticed which door she left through. John stutters in surprise, realizing, as Michael says it, that there has never been a door there. He taunts John, saying his mind is playing tricks on him. Since this is all audible, who knows how long that door has been there? I love how ambiguous that is. John tells Michael to let Helen out, and in retaliation, Michael stabs him. I think in the hand, as later in 53 Crusader, Martin doubts John having accidentally stabbed himself with a bread knife. Likely location for it. John, in fear, asks who he is. I am not a who archivist, I am a what. A who requires a degree of identity I can't ever retain. Every time John tries to pin down an answer, Michael avoids responding, throwing confusion and saying it's difficult to talk about himself. He says he wanted to talk to John as well, that he intervened before and wants to see what happens. Michael says losing the Institute would disrupt the balance of the struggle, and John asks if there is some war. Michael knows that the stranger is spying on the Institute, starting with not Sasha, and it's gearing up for the unknowing. If Prentice had killed everyone, there would be no one to stop the ritual, and thus Michael showed Sasha the CO2 canisters. Balanced for now. Those are the secret tools that we will use later. Later in the season, Michael will intervene again, helping John escape into the Institute tunnels by using his corridors as quick travel portals. John is escaping from the Not Sasha. He will also stop Tim and Martin from confronting John, trapping them in his corridors. He said he wanted to kill them, but he didn't actually try to do that. I don't know. In 80 the Librarian, Tim and Martin will escape the corridors, mentioning that they saw a woman trapped in there, likely Helen Richardson herself. Keep this in mind, Helen returned to the corridors in October 2016, and famous holiday Elias brutal pipe murders Leitner in February 2017. Helen Richardson's still alive there, and has been there since October 2016. But for now, Michael leaves in this episode. Sorry, we're going back to a new door. But for now, Michael leaves so as to maintain John's innocence, and he ends the recording. Michael receding also stops the interference in the recording. He leaves, the recording gets normal, then it shuts off. Michael Distortion finally appears in this episode and makes a big splash. John knows now that he's around, doing what he wants. And we even get 74 Fatigue, where we see Michael terrorizing Lydia Halligan. Like I said before, the Distortion's door briefly appears in 80 the Librarian during the attack on Jürgen Leitner's library. Eventually, in 146 Threshold, Helen Distortion will tell John that she finished off Marcus Mackenzie, who was being pursued by Michael after he was unable to kill his father, Paul Mackenzie, who gave his statement in 27 A Sturdy Lock. Paul would die naturally of a stroke, but he was terrorized by Michael Distortion for a hot minute there. This episode is such a great introduction for an antagonist maybe ally. He helped with the, the apprentice attack and then the not Sasha. Maybe a friend, because Melanie becomes friends with, well, Michael doesn't become friends with him, but Helen becomes friends with somebody. Anyways, maybe some other thing, and great horror as well. Yeah, Michael's cool. Helen's cool. They look cool. They're funny. Also, they're terrifying. They're gonna eat you in the corridors. The next moment Michael appears will be another intervention in the struggle between the stranger and the eye, literally introducing another change in how the story will progress further.
I've come to a decision, Archivist. I'm going to kill you. It's earlier than I had hoped, but that's life, I suppose. Your life. Before I do, however, I want you to understand, even if it does go against my nature. So, ask your questions.
What?
Ask me.
Case number unknown. Statement of Michael, taken from subject. Date unknown. Released May 16th, 2018. Brief summary of this episode. Nikola Orshinov turns on the tape recorder with a gagging John in the background. Gagged. He's gagged, not gagging. He's gagged. And talks to Elias, describing the waxworks around them. John, having been kidnapped by the agents of the stranger, is restrained and unable to talk. After dismissing Greek and Hope so that the coffin goes away, Nikola tells John that she's changed their plans and wants to use John's skin instead of the gorilla skin in the unknowing. Nikola leaves, saying that she's going to get some lotion to improve John's skin. Later, the tape recorder turns back on as Michael Distortion appears, removing John's gag. He makes John ask his questions, like how he found him and why he's here. Michael's here to kill John to make sure neither the circus nor the archives succeed, but also says he wants some revenge. John's confused, having heard Michael's voice in a previous recording before he became Distortion, and wants clarification. Michael starts his statement, finding it difficult to talk about Distortion, instead focusing on Michael Shelley, who began working in the Institute as Gertrude's assistant. She kept him from knowing about the fears, and he only saw her as a weak old woman. She took him abroad to Russia, boarding Peter Lucas's ship to go to Sannikov land. Gertrude and Michael witness the beginning of the ritual of the spiral, and Michael recounts the euphoria the Distortion felt at becoming. Gertrude sends Michael into the corridors with a nonsensical map that leads him to become the Distortion, ending the ritual. Now, Michael Distortion has become something different and hates Gertrude for it. Killing the Archivist is enough of revenge for him, and tells John that it will be quick to just walk through his door. However, when John tries opening the door, it's locked, which surprises Michael, who tries to open it. Instead, Michael is destroyed as the door opens, revealing Helen Richardson, the new Distortion. Helen Distortion now tells John that Michael distracted them and took a new form. She offers John an escape, saying she doesn't want to kill him, and she takes the risk, ending the episode. This, of course, is the episode that touches on the spiral's ritual. I gotta touch on the rituals, of course. This is also the middle part of the show, the title literally introducing a new change in the plot. I usually think of episode 100 as the midpoint of the season of the show because it's 200 total episodes, but because it's an even number, the middle is like in between them, so 100, you had to be there, is a good, also because it's a special, I guess, because it's funny and it's different. And then, 101, important stuff. This episode concludes Michael's storyline and starts Helen's, setting her up for the next half of the show. For context, the beginning of this episode is coming off of a plotline started earlier in the season. In 97, We Don't Talk About the Pit, Nikola Orshinov threatens John and tasks him with finding the ancient gorilla skin necessary for the unknowing. Then, 2 episodes later, in 99 Dust to Dust, Nikola changes her mind and has Regan and Hope kidnap John. We see now that she's hiding him in the House of Wax in Great Yarmouth, which will be the location of the ritual of the unknowing. Nikola talks to the tape recorder, asking if it's Elias who listens to these. She gloats to Elias that she has John and means to keep him. At this, John reacts to the coffin, which lingers around Brecon and Hope, and Nicola dismisses them to get the coffin away. I get a sense that it disturbs her. A nice, interesting flaw here. And it's really fun that as they drag it away, we hear the slight humming that comes from the coffin. That will be elaborated further when I eventually talk about the coffin. Now, just the two of them, Nicola continues talking to Elias, asking him if she can call him Elias repeatedly, which is a fun nod to the reveal that Elias is actually Jonah Magnus, that Jonah has been body hopping, body switching. It looks like Nicola knows about this at some level. It's unknown in general if other avatars know about this or to what extent. In 96 Return to Sender, when John and Daisy mention Elias around Sarah Baldwin, she asks if that's who he is now. But before John can question this, Daisy interrupts. Later in 159 The Last, Peter Lucas mentions that he knew him as Elias for a long time, but he had originally met him as James Wright. And of course, all of the old guard of avatars know, as Jonah learned how to body switch from Maxwell Rayner, but none of the old guard has survived besides Simon Fairchild. And he has not mentioned anything about Elias. Actually, is Simon Fairchild part of the old guard? It was Magnus, Rayner, Smirk, Lucas, Mordecai Lucas. Yeah. And then Von Klozen, and then the doctor guy. Yeah, I don't think Simon Fairchild was part of the old guard. He's definitely very famous in the avatars, though. Anyway, Nicola tells Elias that John is tied to a chair surrounded by bad, uncanny waxworks. She thankfully talked Sarah Baldwin down from stapling him to the chair, as Sarah was probably angry that they attacked her, but also, I think that Nicola didn't have him stapled to the chair because it would damage his skin, and Nicola wouldn't want that. So, I guess points for kindness? Points for wanting to have the skin intact so he doesn't get stapled. John yells through his gag a bit more, and Nicola scolds him for interrupting, telling Elias that he hasn't raised John right. I don't know if this is a nod to Elias grooming John to be marked, or just a joke from Nicola. I don't know how much she knows about that, but it's all really fun how she talks. Also, fun fact, we learned from the season 3 Q&A that to make John sound gagged, Johnny Sims, voice actor, a writer, everything, literally stuck his fist in his mouth and tried to talk, and that's how he made it sound like John was gagged. Nicola complains to Elias that John won't stop asking questions, something someone kidnapped would do, but also, John does ask questions a lot, and add the annoyance of being compelled to answer these questions as well. Though, it's not as strong as he will be eventually in season 4, but, Nicola's probably annoyed that the compulsion is there. The point is, people who are kidnapped will generally ask questions. I wouldn't know. It's just a funny joke there. Nicola teases him and says that she's the one who will ask questions now. She asks how he's feeling, and a transcript says that he has muffled feelings, which, yeah, I hear that. Really funny moments here in a terrifying situation. Nicola explains to John that she changed her mind, and after thinking about it, she could wait for John to find the gorilla skin, but it would be more fun to just skin him instead. She again teases Elias, saying that he can't find this place as she's been able to hide it from him. I don't know how Nicola hid this from Elias, but it makes sense. She's a stranger. They're all stranger. They conceal whatever. She asks John if he has a preferred skin lotion, and she says she's going to get a collection. And as she leaves, the recorder cuts off, and then soon after, the recording starts up again. In terms of date keeping, John was kidnapped sometime in summer. In 94, Dead Woman Walking, which was the most recent life statement, Georgie records her statement in late April 2017. Later in 104 Sneak Preview, Tim records his statement in mid-June 2017. Also, 102 Nesting Instinct, John argued with Elias about being kidnapped for a month. You didn't do anything for a month. I was kidnapped for a month. He also mentions to Martin that his skin is in great conditioning, implying, the lotion on his skin. John was likely kidnapped in early May and freed late May, early June. This implies that in this episode, between the two recordings, a month has passed, during which Nicola has slathered his skin with lotion. My thought is, the first recording of her talking to Elias is very recently having kidnapped John, and then the second recording is when he gets out. So a month has passed between that, is what I'm guessing. So in the second recording, we hear Michael's echoing laughter, tickled at seeing John tied up like this. He tells John that he's made the decision to kill him, which John gives a frustrated groan at, having heard this all before. Nicola literally said that she didn't kill him like a few paragraphs before. Michael says that it's earlier than he wanted, but still wants John to understand. He removes his gag and makes John ask him a question. As I've mentioned prior, Michael has found it hard to talk about himself, but now that John's getting a bit stronger, his questions, his compulsion can help guide Michael's discussion about himself, about what happened to him. John asks how he found them. Really fun. Michael says, "The eye watches and the stranger conceals. But me, I lie, archivist. I am the throat of delusion incarnate. They can't hide you from me." Which is a really fun way to describe himself. The throat of delusion incarnate. So fun. At John's questions, Michael says he wants the unknowing to fail and is here to kill John, wanting to both foil the circus's plan, but also to make sure the archives fails. He also says he's motivated by revenge, which frustrates John, saying he doesn't even know him. "I am Michael. I was not always Michael. I do not want to be Michael, but Michael stole the only purpose I have ever known." Prior in 99 Dust to Dust, the end of the tape has a human Michael interrupting Gertrude's recording. For lack of a better term, this made John spiral, having heard so much about Gertrude and the people she's hurt, now learning that Michael, the distortion, may have been her assistant. John tries to make sense of all of this in that episode. Gets frustrated, talks to Georgie, says he wants to leave, gets kidnapped. Now, one-on-one, John asks the distortion if he was Gertrude's assistant. Michael denies it. When John tries to push, saying he heard the recording, Michael doubles down, saying that he heard Michael, and he is not that man. And even more frustrated, John, as I would be, lashes out, and Michael warns him to keep quiet. The cramped casket sings loud, but not loud enough to drown out screaming. This returns to the humming we heard, giving another name for the coffin as well, cramped casket. I don't think it's ever called anything else. Cramped casket. That's fun. Everything is fun. I love fun here. Michael tries to make John understand, saying that the person on the tape was Michael, and he was something else, but now he's Michael, and that other person is dead. He also mentions this has happened before, that someone he's taken into the corridors becomes him, but it's rare. I want to know who else has taken a mental of the distortion before. Who was that person who killed Ivo Lensig's father? Who was there at Jürgen Leitner's library attack? However, what makes that Michael special is that he had help. John wants to know, and Michael delights at being able to give a statement. John starts as he usually does, giving a space for a date, fishing for information, how long he's been here, but Michael only gives last day of the archivist's life. I wish the story kept a bit more with current dates. Anytime I try to keep track of the time, I have to refer to the wiki of other people being a little bit more smarter than I am keeping up with dates. That's neither here nor there. Michael begins his statement by trying to trace the beginning of this distortion, saying he's always been, and time is difficult to form. Instead, he switches to talking about Michael Shelley. The first time we hear his surname, a clear reference to Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein. For the sake of this video, when I say Michael, I mean the distortion, for now on, and Shelley as human Michael. I should have done Richardson for Helen, but there was no confusion there as to who is who, but now Michael is distortion and Shelley is Michael Shelley. Yeah. He talks about Shelley's childhood, a quick paragraph rife with subtle suggestion and implied backstory. Really like when Johnny writes like this, that almost every single line has such a plethora of information that you can just dive into, but it's never like explored, which is really fun. When he was in school, he lost a friend to something like me. His friend was named Ryan, but those in power simply called him schizophrenic. I don't know if he was, but it doesn't matter. He was so dreadfully afraid his world wasn't real that to make it so was almost nothing. Michael was there when he was taken. He never got over what he saw or didn't see. In quotations, Michael Sortion talks about Michael Shelley as Michael, but when I talk, it's going to be Shelley. You know what I mean. You know what happens. So dissecting this paragraph, first, Michael suggests that Ryan was haunted by a spiral manifestation. Doesn't describe what kind, it's just something like him, so a spiral manifestation. There's some fun wordplay of his name was Ryan, but those in power simply called him schizophrenic, is a small critique on the stigma placed on people's mental illness and how they are often boiled down to what's wrong with them instead of trying to meet them as a person. So like, he was Ryan, but people who were diagnosing him just called him schizophrenic. Really fun, like, what is that, nihilism? Yeah, that's really fun nihilism. Michael isn't sure if he was actually schizophrenic, compounded with whatever haunted him, separating the real mental illness from the horrors, which is good. Ryan was afraid that his world wasn't real, so he easily killed himself. Michael calls it taken. I assume the suicide being assisted by this spiral manifestation, or like the spiral manifestation taking him willingly or something like that. Not fully sure. Really fun though. And Shelley witnessed it happen. He was left scarred by what he did or didn't see, which led him to the Institute. Again, like slant-wise, ambiguous writing of did or didn't see. Ugh. Shelley being driven to the Institute, based on what we saw as a child, is similar to what happened with John and Tim. Both of them also scarred by things that they witnessed in their childhood or a bit ago that would eventually lead them to work for the archives. For John, it was 91, A Guest from Mr. Spider, and the web lightener that he found. And for Tim, it was 104, Sneak Preview, and witnessing his brother being killed by Nicola Asgrimaldi. Michael marvels at how well Gertrude was able to distort the truth from Shelley. He believed her to be a weak and frail old woman. We saw this in the end of Gertrude's recording, when she adopted a frailer voice when talking to him. Because of her deception, he thought highly of her.
He cared for her. He trusted her, and she fed him to me. She made him me to destroy our transcendence, and she did not hesitate.
Gertrude's stone-cold will is referenced many times, and this is one of the first times we are shown how flawed and even bad she is. Yeah, she's done some really badass things, but this is one time that she actually sacrificed someone innocent. In 167 Curiosity, John says that Gertrude knew that Emma Harvey was messing with Michael, trying to keep him ignorant, and realized that his naivete could be useful to her. Gertrude had prepared her assistant to be ready to travel, so it wasn't a red flag when she told Shelley that he was accompanying her to Russia. Michael says that Shelley would be worried if he knew that their destination didn't exist, Zemlya Sanikova. They went to Dixon, a town in Russia, the northernmost post in Russia and all of the Asian continent. There, they boarded on Peter Lucas's ship, which is really fun considering he hated Gertrude, or will eventually hate her when she ruins his ritual. I believe she ruins his ritual after this. But, you know, really funny that she's like, hey, Peter, can you come take us to Senekova? Michael laughs at Shelley's worry for Gertrude, still seeing her as frail, worried what the cold might do to her. But Gertrude shed her disguise as they got closer to the Arctic. Somehow, they arrived at Zemlya Sanikova, Sanikov land. Zemlya Sanikova was a phantom island reported to be in the Arctic Ocean. In 1811, a Russian merchant and explorer called Yakov Sanikov reported a bluish fog to the northeast of the New Siberian Islands, and since then, people have tried finding this island. In 1886 and 1893, Russian explorer Edward von Toll records having sighted this island. Other explorers couldn't find it, but it was still incorporated in maps of the Arctic Ocean. Edward von Toll is mentioned in 133 Dead Horse as part of the hunt's ritual, having disappeared in 1902 while searching for Sannikov land. This historical phantom island is the setting in the 1926 book Sannikov Land by Vladimir Obruchev. This book was then later adapted into The Land of Sannikov in 1974, directed by Albert Merkchen and Leonid Pavlov. Similar to the Fawcett Expedition, which I recently read, the Lost City of Zed book by David Gran, I'm interested in how Johnny Sims learned about Sannikov Land, as its scant mentions in the show are very inspired. Gertrude tells Shelley that she needs to fight a great evil and needs his help, and because he trusts her, he agrees to do anything. At this, Michael asks John if she's right. Am I evil, Archivist? Is a thing evil when it simply obeys its own nature, when it embodies its nature, when that nature is created by those which revile it, almost humanizing these monsters created by the fears that were created by humans? Is something evil if it is just fear? But no, yeah, Michael's evil. This person's evil. Michael says that Gertrude wanted to stop him. He calls the spiral by a statement name. It is not what it is. Not as provocative as I do not know you for the stranger, in my opinion. It's not as provocative, but still good enough, like it knows you for the I. Still want more statement names for all of the entities, whatever. In terms of other names for the entity, in A.D. the Librarian, Leitner says his assistant Domingo called the spiral es mentiras, or it is lies, or it is lying. I want to note, transcript is written weirdly. Is mentira or something like that? I believe because Domingo is a Spanish name, it's supposed to be es mentiras, which is Spanish for it is lies, or it is lying. Actually, it's son mentiras, but son is more about like Persian, and it es, the thing is lying. Anyways, later in 91, The Coming Storm, Mike Crew says that the Lichtenberg figure is a part of the Twisting the Seat. All really fun ways to describe the spiral, really fun names. And then we get to the ritual. Out of the 12 rituals that we learn about, Web and Corruption and Extinction don't have rituals, and The Stranger gets 2, I would rank The Great Twisting at number 5. I'll touch on the rituals for the respective field that I'm talking about, so I'll share their rank when I get to them. Ooh, we're getting to the last 3 soon. I really like what is described here by Michael, but almost by design, I don't truly understand what's happening. It's not as exact as the Silence, the one above in the ranking, but it maintains its identity well. Michael says the worker of clay had labored for decades on that contorted, impossible edifice of doors and stairs and falsehoods and smiles. That's also where the blooper reel comes from. The worker of clay is later seen in 126 Sculptor's Tools, a spiral avatar named Gabriel who terrorizes a sculpting class and almost recruited Deborah Madaki into the ritual. He had sculpted clay into a door and said it was his friend, and then later invited Deborah to join him at Sannikov Land. Gabriel, the worker of clay, created some sort of impossible building, surrounded by other spiral supplicants. 1,000 staring mortals stood, and not one of them believed themselves sane to look upon it. Mortals, to me, implies people ready to be sacrificed, similar to what was happening in The Extinguished Sun for the Dark, people enthralled by this spiral, going mad, and ready to dive into madness. Maybe also some spiral agents, not fully sure, we don't really get into that. And in the center, the door that would open to all the places that were never there, was me. The distortion at the very center, becoming. This ritual is attempting to bring the spiral into our reality, and I assume that the smiling people are to be sent into the impossible building, feeding the fear and summoning it on an island that doesn't exist. Great imagery and repeated motifs. I don't feel like anything is actually happening. Like, what is the trigger? Such as, like, the dancer for the unknowing, or the sudden forced isolation of the silence? You know? It feels more like an experience, similar to the Everchase for the hunt, but it's more static than not. Like, what's happening here? They're just sort of standing and smiling and laughing. Gertrude and Shelley stepped on warm land and walked through a jungle, impossible in such a northern latitude. Up the mountain, following the sound of laughter, they found the building. They found the distortion. Impossible buildings, impossible nature, impossible land. Michael did not go mad, though no words you could have said would have convinced him otherwise. The mind does not shatter, Archivist. It is soft and malleable. It bends and twists and returns to what it was, though what you see and feel may leave their mark upon it. If Michael thought he had lost his mind, it was only because what he saw with crystal clarity was simply not something that could be real. However, for Gertrude, she knew what to pay attention to, almost like she allowed just enough of the eye to guide her. She found a door, the distortion's door. Michael says he was busy, distracted by the joy and ecstasy of becoming, of the spiral coming through. He did not notice Gertrude opening its door and sending Shelley inside. She had also given Shelley a map. It was an impossible map, but Shelley could use it in the distortion's corridors. Like dream logic, a map created to be impossible could be used to navigate an impossible area. It made no sense, lines overlapping and inverting, but once within, Michael knew which turns to make, which doors to open, which mirrors to shatter, until he became me. Almost like the map wasn't going to actually lead him anywhere, but the process was turning him into the distortion. As Gertrude noticed in 126 Sculptor's Tool, Gabriel said that if his friend had a name, he'd be confused. And Gertrude planned for Shelley to become the distortion, disrupting the ritual. An amazing performance here as Michael describes to John how this affected him.
Even sharper than the joy of becoming is the agony of being opened and remade. To have your who torn bloody from your what and another crudely lashed into its place. To become Michael.
Michael says that after this, the impossible building collapsed and Gabriel, the worker of clay, killed himself. He says he tore out his veins to dissolve himself in crimson mud. Fun imagery here. The sacrifices, or perhaps agents of the spiral, were cast to all the places that aren't. Slantwise implications of impossible places. Some have still not found their way out again, suggesting they survived it and are trapped. Human or monster? I'm not sure. Dead or alive? I'm not sure either. And Gertrude was soon back on Lucas's ship, as Sannikov land once again never existed. Not even sinking, and more just disappearing. Great ambiguous writing here. Michael finishes the statement saying he now has to live as Shelley, having killed him but being him now, having a name and being confused by it. He was not able to become the spiral in our reality and is back to being a monster picking off random people just to get a hit of fear. He hates Gertrude for what she did to him, and John asks if he ever tried to go after her. Michael says she knew how to protect herself, so he couldn't get to her. I'm very interested in how she was able to do that. We've seen her be confident about that. No elaboration there, unfortunately. Either way, revenge wasn't consuming Michael, so he didn't need to kill her. Plus, as an archivist, she wasn't as good as John is. Michael had hoped that John would stop the unknowing, the reason he interfered with Jane Prentice and not Sasha. But because John's kidnapped now, and his skin is about to be used for the ritual, Michael plans to kill him. Michael tells John that his death through the corridors will be much more pleasant than through Nicola, so John gives in, not seeing a way out of this. Michael makes the door appear and tells John to open it, but it's locked. Michael tells him to keep trying, but John says it's locked. Michael tries the door himself and he has a pause, a realization, and the most horrible sounding scream erupts from him.
Oh no.
I'm sorry I had to show you how it is because it is horrible. The scream resolves into a door opening and then silence. And from the corridors, John hears a voice asking if he wants to come inside. It's Helen Richardson from the new door. But nah. She says she's not Michael now that Michael and Shelley got distracted, focused on revenge against Gertrude and John. Shelley's anger at dying took over the distortion's goals, and it lost its way. Now it has shed Michael and become Helen Distortion, better and new. Distortion Helen is an amazing... I don't know if it's a plot twist per se, but a twist nonetheless. Another twist. John asks if Helen still wants to kill him, and she says that she doesn't. That Michael wanted to, but Helen liked John, so things are different now. It's difficult for her to talk about this. She offers him an escape, and rightfully so. John asks if this is a trick. Helen asks what he'd do if it was a trick, a stalemate. After this, Helen Distortion peppers a plot with brief but memorable appearances. In 115 Taking Stock, Helen visits John, wanting to talk about her mixed emotions of being a new thing, having just killed someone. She mentions she doesn't think she was meant to be Helen, but Michael's anger was pulling him away, so Helen replaced him. But she says Helen wasn't ready. Helen Richardson had been returned to the corridors and spent months there. October 2016. In her hand was a map, an impossible map, the same kind of map that Gertrude had found used to end the ritual. The distortion had kept her alive for so long, maybe planning to become her, but Michael had sped things up and had to change. October 2016 to late May, early June 2017. That's insane. In Taking Stock, John asks why he should believe anything she says, that Michael said he was the throat of delusion incarnate, and Helen affirms that she's never told him a lie. She just wants to talk because, like her, John is also changing, but he pushes her away before anything can be resolved in that episode. Helen appears more comfortable in her own being in 131 Flesh. She had helped Melanie and Basira deal with the attack on the Institute from the flesh and agrees to help John in interrogating Bone Turner. There, she and Melanie have some form of friendship, which was really nice to see. And she later helps in 143 Heart of Darkness, trapping a fleeing Manuela Dominguez and helping John and Basira return to the Institute. In 146 Threshold, John confronts her for having finished off Marcus Mackenzie. She's embraced her role as horrifying monster and suggests he does the same. He wants to know if she was controlled by the web to try to lure Mackenzie into Hilltop Road, and she doesn't absolve him of his fear. In 152 A Gravedigger's Envy, when John talks to Helen in Institute tunnels, she mentions that she knows the tunnels well, and when talking about avatars, says that Helen first felt guilt at killing people, but it fed her well. Eventually, in 157 Rotten Core, Helen refuses to help John in reaching the center of the tunnels, wanting to watch as things unravel for him. Helen comes in and out a lot in Season 5 after the London incursion, annoying John and Martin, driving them subtly apart more and more, going as far as, in 183 Monument, letting the cat out of the bag and telling Martin that he has a fear domain of his own. John hadn't been hiding it, per se, but he was finding it hard to find the right time to tell him that. Then in 187 Checking Out, having been separated when Martin enters his own domain, John walks through Helen's domain, a twisting, impossible hotel. Here, people are trapped to wander lost in liminal hallways. She had gambled by telling Martin about his domain that John would enter alone. She was worried that Martin would make John kill her. In their discussion, as John navigates the impossible hotel, he tells her what he realized about Michael's death. He liked Helen. He could have grown into disliking her for being a secret Tory. Now you use her form, see her mind, but they're just tools. Michael had nothing you could use but a razor-straight desire for vengeance. But you saw something in Helen that would work on me much more subtly. So you took her. In a way, what John says in the Wax Museum, what he says in Another Twist, is correct, that this is all an elaborate trick, using Helen and her hesitation to endear her to him, to drop his defenses, but John sees right through it now. John is compelled to take a statement of one of Helen's victims, and after she ushers her away, John agrees with her that Martin would have been convinced to kill her after that. John realizes more of Helen's truth, that she is dangerous because she can be friends with them, but will always hide behind that smile. She says she will help them, but won't. She says she'll be there, but can't. John catches Helen in a lie, which she had said she would never do that. The lie was that she wasn't afraid of him. He uses this lie to kill Helen, finding her and ending the distortion for good. To finish off the amazing writing of the distortion, in 188 Center of Attention, John summarizes the twisting of the distortion. I know that Helen Richardson was gone, the same way Michael Shelley was gone. I know the distortion was neither of them. Also know that the distortion of Helen was not the same being as the distortion of Michael, but they were also twisted up as a direct path of the spiral. It's like I could follow the knowledge of any one line of identity, but as soon as I tried to take a step back and see the whole, the picture changed. To Martin, he says, I want to believe that the thing was just wearing Helen Richardson like a mask, that I finally avenged her. After Sasha drew Michael's attention, after Elias sent Helen to John, after Helen saved John from Michael and yet kept messing with his mind, John was finally able to end the distortion's manipulations. It all builds and curls into itself in such amazing ways, so many threads to follow. The distortion is truly an amazing depiction of the spiral. But returning to this episode, another twist. At the middle of the show, Helen offers John an escape, and they are at a stalemate. Is this all a trick? John doesn't know, but he knows the current danger is Nicola and a stranger. Ironically, it's a different kind of mask that helps him escape. He asks how long he's been here, and Helen doesn't know. Time is hard. Helen was in those corridors for months, but to her, how long was it? John isn't ready, but he steps through Helen's door, ending the episode. Not only does this episode explore the spiral's ritual, the great twisting, it also sets up for an amazing storyline while ending another one. And don't even get me started on the unknowing. Watch my stranger exploration video for that. I love this show so much.
Final comments.
These 3 episodes, oh my god, my voice. These 3 episodes I like for different reasons. 83 Lost and Found is a queer horror story with interesting implications and great horror. 47 The New Door grows the body of work of liminal horror, introducing Helen Richardson and Michael Distortion, both amazing characters. 101 Another Twist describes the spiral's ritual, the great twisting, and ends Michael's story with the beginning of Helen Distortion's introduction. I would rank the episodes from best to least best, 47, 101, 38. Or maybe 101, 47. I'm not fully sure. Overall, I find the spiral to be very ambitious in what it wants to do with its use of fractals and breaks of reality, a good indicator of what's happening. It's carried by the appearance of the distortions and its 2 identities, Helen and Michael, complementary faces for this antagonist. Like I said, the spiral manages to maintain its relevance throughout the entire show because of these 2 or 3 characters, depending on how you see it. Michael Shelley, Helen Richardson, Distortion, maybe 4 characters, Michael Distortion, Helen Distortion, whatever, you know what I mean. In general, for the spiral, some of its appearances tend to be on the weaker side of horror for me, and some episodes could also be spiral, but are mainly focused on a different fear or a mixture of them. But for the episodes of the spiral where the distortion isn't present, it still manages to reach for that feeling of unreality and madness with varying degrees of success. There's only so much you can do in this audio format. The Great Twisting is a pretty interesting ritual, not as strong as others, but it maintains its identity. Its focus is on the distortion. I wish there was a bit more build-up for it as well, at least one other episode to talk about Sannikov Land or the morsels used, like are they sacrifices, agents, or what? Or maybe in showing where Gertrude got that map for Michael Shelley. Maybe there's another victim of the distortion before the distortion became Michael. That'd be cool. I think this show is very successful in portraying the spiral through these manifestations and events. More avatars could have been used, more artifacts given the spotlight, even a Lightner or 2 would have been nice. But, like I keep saying, The distortion is more than enough. And seeing the mass amounts of fan art and fan fiction for the distortion, Michael Shelley, Helen Richardson, is really cool, a great indicator of how well these characters hit for the audience. I personally like Helen Distortion most, mainly because we get more of a gamut of her personality throughout seasons 4 and 5. Of the other episodes of The Spiral, 187 Checking Out, as I mentioned, is the end of Helen Distortion's episode, with great moments of horror and a fun statement. However, as much as I wanted to cover this episode in this 3 limit that I'm doing, its fundamental episodes are 47 and 101, and I wanted to save a spot for the standalone. I could have done 47, 101, and then 187, but I wanted to have at least one standalone episode to talk about. 26 A Distortion has the opposite problem, where a lot builds from it that, in this video, it's used more as a reference. The contents of the episode are fine, are good, are great, and getting a statement recorded from Sasha is really fun, introducing Michael, etc., and continuing the Prentice storyline. But I could get a lot more material from 47, 101, and 38. 183 Monument is fun, with its temple domain, a simple trap masquerading as a complex puzzle. Also really good that The Spiral is 2 for 2 for good episodes in season 5. I mean, this one and Checking Out are the, as far as I remember, the only, no, I mean, okay, there's 3 Spiral episodes, 187, A Monument, and we'll get to the other one. But it's 2 for 3 of really good episodes in season 5. We'll get to that. 85 Upon the Stair, I can appreciate for its lulling horror, but it's just not for me. Some of the conflicting information annoys me, but I like what it's trying to do. I understand what it's trying to do. It's just not for me. 74 Fatigue has Michael the Distortion terrorizing Lydia Halligan, who can't sleep. It's fun, but feels superfluous. I like the pacing of this episode, the slow descent into madness, but it doesn't really do much for me in general. 126 Sculptor's Tool was fine, but I feel like it tries too hard to do something with its clay and then shifting shapes and stuff like that. It could have been useful as in earlier episodes before the description of the ritual, but in the beginning of season 4, it doesn't accomplish much. I do like, though, that sometimes the use of clay as a proxy for the spiral, the things get kind of lost for me. 146 Threshold and 27 A Sturdy Lock are in the same camp, but I enjoy Threshold a bit more than A Sturdy Lock. Marcus Mackenzie's story in Threshold is much more compelling than Paul Mackenzie's story in A Sturdy Lock, as he's stuck in his room. But overall, the Mackenzies as a storyline falls flat for me. 177 Wonderland, no, I don't like that episode. That's the third Spiral episode in season 5, and I just don't like it. I don't like Dr. David. I'm sorry. Wait, was Dr. David the David that was taken from the Spiral face? Whoa. I don't know. I just thought of that. Obviously, these are mine own opinions, so I would love to hear from you what you think about The Spiral. Let me know why you like The Spiral, which episodes are your favorite, what scares you about it. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, share with your friends, let me know what you think. I'd love to hear some feedback from y'all about my videos and my channel. Don't forget to be passionate, and I'll see you later.